Well, hello, that's me again. Today is January the 20th, 2025. It is Monday. Obviously, my congratulations to now President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. And basically, congratulations were pouring all over the world. Mr. Putin also called him, congratulated him with his being sworn into the office as the President of the United States. And before we go, however, and as you might expect, there was a lot of bloviation, there was a lot of, statements which are absolutely not true in many respects about making America great again without essentially, changing very little, probably some cosmetic things. Albeit, I'm not saying that there were no positive movements. There were some positive movements already in the United States, but it's far, far too few to affect anything which happened to the country. And before we go, I want to quote for you one of the best wordsmiths in the United States, and he's a great dramaturgist and novelist, James Howard Kunstler, because his summary of what we just shook off us, granted with all narcissistic issues with Trump, it encapsulates essentially, or summarizes, if you wish, brilliantly. And here it is. Look what he wrote about Joe Biden and his administration. So he says, one way or another, they're going to be found out what he did, even if many managed to evade prosecution, which we already know. In the morning, he issued blanket pardon for many people who have to be behind bars. But at least we are going to learn a lot more about who was pulling Joe's strings and exactly what they did and how, including their trick of making the news media hostage to their crimes. So adios, Joe Biden, you miserable treasonous bastard. History will record you as one of the presidents so far who was consciously a villain outright, in true self-knowledge of his own wickedness. You left your country a wreck in every dimension, in national security, national bankruptcy, national pride, and national confidence. Go back to Delaware and sit in the dim light of your room, with the curtains drawn so you won't have to hear about the gruesome discoveries to come of what you left behind. And let me explain a little bit what has been left behind by Joe Biden and his administration and a bunch of his schlimazzles, such as Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, Mr. Anthony Blinken, and other kind of people who qualify for being not merely in violation of the Constitution of the United States, and their minions from the mainstream media, United States mainstream media, or corporate ones, which have to die. They are war criminals themselves. Average American foreign policy journal is a war criminal. Not all, most are, however. And let me start with explanation what they left, so to speak. If we go out right now, and that also applies very much to administration of Mr. Trump, because he has very little time to understand fully what is happening. And in this case, let me quote Mr. Bannon, who used to be his strategist. And Mr. Bannon, by the way, if you're wondering why he is still important, well, don't forget, the guy graduated U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. So he is essentially a cadre officer. So, former cadre officer nonetheless. And he says that Ukraine could become Trump's Vietnam. If we aren't careful, it will turn into Trump's Vietnam. That's what happened to Richard Nixon, which is absolutely correct. He ended up owning the war, and it went down as his war, not Lyndon Johnson's. Bannon, who is no longer a key figure in the Trump team, said he argued that unless Trump clearly commits to stopping military aid to Ukraine, the conflict could overshadow his presidency. Most likely it will, despite the fact that what we're already hearing from the all kinds of the corners, for example, Trump aides already are given task to arrange the phone call with Vladimir Putin. And here we have problem. Trump will be talking to Vladimir Putin, as he claims, which is absolutely not true. It's a typical hot air from him that he knows Vladimir Putin. He knows very little about Vladimir Putin as the person, because you need to know Russian language, you need to know those cultural Russian idiosyncrasies. In the end, you need to know Russian history, and you need to understand military realities of the 21st century. But let's take a look what Mr. Trump will be facing, because there are already indications which tell you that, well, I'm not gonna go now about Keith Kellogg. I think so he's totally ignorant, which you would expect from the American general, average American general. But if you have people like, well, how to put it, oh gosh, here it is. We have this very interesting thing. This is from Responsible Statecraft, and it is written by Steve Deal, and it was written a couple weeks, well, not couple, 12 days ago, and as you can see yourself, he correctly states that yes, US generals should be fired. We need a Marshall moment to reform the military leadership selection system before it's too late. I have news for Stephen Deal, who himself is the United States Marine Corps general, that it is already too late. It's long to explain why, because I wrote so much about it. So, and he correctly states, in October 1939, just 1 month after he took over as Army Chief of Staff, General George C. Marshall famously winnowed the ranks of the hidebound senior officers to prepare for war. Most of them have their minds set in outmoded patterns, Marshall told his leadership team, and can change to meet the new conditions they may face if we become involved in the war that started in Europe. Well, Marshall was prophetic, obviously, and he was essentially one of the greatest, well, if not the greatest American strategist, and definitely no doubt actually about it that he was a very good general. So, but the point is that nothing changed. In fact, things got much worse. And when you begin to look attentively what Trump will be approaching Russia with and talk to Putin, thinking that obviously this propaganda from Kiev, which was pumped into his administration by this dude who is Mr. Kellogg, as you can hear yourself, Keith Kellogg is meeting in Paris all kinds of the fringe elements of the Ukrainian politics, and considering the fact that he doesn't understand mathematics, basic mathematics, forget about complex issues and the combat models, he still thinks that, yeah, and Trump will be thinking, talking to Vladimir Putin sometime, I don't know, in February, that, yeah, you know, Vlad, you lost 600,000, you know, your troops killed. Well, Ukrainians lost 400,000. And what are you going to do? Let me tell you, you know, what you have to do. So the guy will have very little understanding of the situation, and he is not situationally aware as of now. He may change this, but, you know, appointing Mr. Kellogg, who needs to be fired before he became the general, actually, tells you everything you need to know. This is a bunch of the exceptionalists, very average, mediocre at best, in reality, very uncultured people in military sense, and it's not just the fact that U.S. generals should be fired. This is, for example, this is American Conservative Magazine 4 days ago. And then again, this is the CYA. Cover your ass already, the mode in Washington. It started in earnest about 2 weeks ago when everybody understood that Trump is becoming the president of the United States and nothing could be done about it. And very many people are, you know what, they need to be behind bars. So, and here we have Mr. Cardin, yet another, you know, bureaucratic worm from whatever, the Foreign Service. And he talks about that getting Russia wrong, a quarter century of Putin. What began with fanfare has ended in embarrassment. Well, didn't I tell you so? The question is, it's not only quarter century of Putin and getting Russia wrong. United States was getting Russia wrong all the time. As a result, it not only got Russia wrong, and I am on record, you can quote me on that. United States doesn't have serious scholars in Russia, but there is a problem that United States doesn't even recognize what it is in its own right, and obviously it was getting itself wrong. And here we have the basically explanation, which is, very much in line with the requirement to fire those American generals. And so he writes, and you know what? He writes by 2011, 2012, the unelected U.S. foreign policy establishment, which basically calls the shots regardless of whom we Americans sent to Washington, had decided that Putin was a man with whom we could not and should not do business. Any sort of diplomatic relationship ended, not with the Maidan coup and subsequent Ukrainian civil war in the spring of 2014, nor with Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. No, it essentially ended when Putin decided to return to Russian presidency for a third term. Now, what's the deal with State Department and those unelected officials who, well, they are unelected, they're a bunch of, it's a blob, it's a bunch of their, people who really do not even understand what they're doing, because most of them are their degreed, credentialed, illiterates, let's put it this way. They go through those programs in Ivy League which brainwash them. They don't have any qualifications in terms of explaining even to their higher-ups what is going on. So basically, and I wrote about this in my third book, Disintegration, you have those 25, 26-year-old nincompoops who won't be able to hold any meaningful conversation on the craft which doesn't exist. Diplomacy doesn't exist as the state's craft in the United States. It's gone. It's dead. So they will not be able to hold any meaningful discussion on any issue pertaining to, for example, Russia, or for that matter, anything outside in the world, because they are nothing more than operatives, and they are nothing more than conduits for American ultimatums, which already basically are being sent into the empty space, because nobody really listens to the United States anymore, and it has everything to do with American generals who do not understand what real war is, and they don't. Except for obviously middle level, those colonels and brigadier generals who probably do some operational planning and must face the real information, must face real data. And as a result of that, we have this situation. Look at this. Scores of Washington Post, scores of Korea state diplomats resigned before Trump's inauguration. And Trump's team requests the high-level resignation as the president-elect prepares a sharp break with the Biden administration. And he has to, or rather he must, if he doesn't follow into the, path which Steve Bannon and many of us, warned about, that he may own this Ukrainian cluster coitus really fast. And let me tell you, this is not good news for him, because basically what is happening right now with even American military-industrial complex, it is one thing to, make those, pathos-ridden statements, but reality is very different. So much so that Mr. Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, billionaire. They call him tech billionaire. He's not really tech billionaire, but yeah, whatever, so, and very rich guy, and he's 82 years old. He has roots from Russia, from those Jewish communities, and look what he writes. And he wrote it in his, the blog, it's not really blog, it's essentially, some kind of the media outlet by Mike Bloomberg. And a week ago, he wrote, with the help of yet another United States Marine Corps General David Berger, he wrote Strategic Edge, a blueprint for breakthroughs in defense innovations. They do admit that United States lags very dramatically, actually. I am on record, you can quote me to this General David Berger, that United States lost the arms race and some gaps will never be closed. But they talk about that they need something immediately, you know, how blueprint for breakthrough in defense innovation in privately commissioned report addressing the challenges facing American strategic defense posture. I have to immediately state, there is no strategic defense posture in the United States. United States doesn't know how to do strategy. What passes for strategy are memes, all those, you know, catchphrases and hot button words, but it's not a strategy. They do not understand what strategy is. Yet, guess what? This is a classic paper about, you know, for everything good against everything bad. And look what they say. Field emerging critical technologies by creating an alternative pipeline. The US must establish an alternative procurement pipeline to rapidly acquire and deploy critical technologies at scale, ensuring direct operational impact and strategic advantage to war fighters. Well, I would love to talk with General David Berger about this without all this BS of those, you know, pathos-ridden phrases, because obviously the reckoning is a very hard thing for some people who still didn't lose completely their brains in the United States elites. But as you will go and read this, for example, you will recognize again the same pattern of let's do this and let's do that and we must do this and we must do that, with usually very minimal results, if any. And the question is, even this paper admits that, well, most likely nothing gonna happen. And the question in this case, what are we dealing with? Let me explain. This is what Trump doesn't understand. Neither does Keith Kellogg, who will be looked at as an amateur by Russian generals which come in and will communicate some realities. If he will not believe those realities, well, what can I say? I already made a point and I will repeat it again. I will repeat it now ad nauseam, and you can quote me. And this is where I diverge with Scott Ritter, for example, my dear friend and wonderful human being and very bright and, you know, true strategist in many respects. But this is where I diverge. Scott says that actually nobody ever briefed Mr. Biden that the victory was possible in Ukraine. I think so, he's wrong. I think so, this is what Pentagon and CIA and others were thinking, and CYA, Cover US, already has started. And as I already stated, for example, why Mr. Milley, former Joint Chiefs of Staff, was actually pardoned today in the morning. There are some reasons to do so. Well, let me show you something. This is very interesting. This is our clue, so to speak, because obviously this is to move away or shift away the blame from Milley and his, pathetic rhetoric, which he completely disgraced himself and the U.S. Army and paraded himself as the military amateur. But look at this. Blinken overruled America's top general on Ukraine peace talks, New York Times reports. General Milley reportedly advised Kyiv to leverage its 2022 battlefield gains in negotiation with Moscow. Well, I don't know about battlefield gains, because obviously in order for you to say about gains, you need to accept the fact that you do not understand actually what was the Russian intent and what was Russian strategy. But outgoing U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken urged Ukraine to continue its military efforts against Russia rather than pursue peace negotiations. In late 2022, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley advised Kyiv to capitalize on its battlefield successes by seeking peace talks with Moscow. Well, however, Blinken insisted that Ukraine should press on with its military campaign, the newspaper wrote. The question, and of course the problem with all those so-called American diplomats I meet now, I kind of abstain now for a second to talk about the whole situation with the US military and how essentially the whole TOE, Table of Organization and Equipment of both US military and NATO have been utterly humiliated in their operations, in special military operation by Russians. But there are some things which you have to understand. And the role of Mr. Blinken, who is a schmazel from New York, he is a former attorney or political scientist, same as Jake Sullivan, people who won't understand the first thing about actually real economy, real warfighting capability, about strategy, and what have you. Do I believe that he may have overruled him? Yeah, I do. But the problem is, even before 2022, and as the situation has been demonstrated so well, including through the whole American military establishment, bar a few exceptions here and there, literally using non-stop for 3 years the essentially fairy tales from the Ukrainian side, or whatever is left of it, and believing this BS. And Mr. Kellogg believes it, still believes it. So what do you expect? You have to understand that the real military and intel professional always makes those conclusions on the matter of the veracity or validity, if you wish, of information, which actually assigned some kind of the weight. And the weight being, it's, well, sometimes it is basically mathematical expectation or probability. How probable is that? US military, if you look, go across all publications and all those so-called, auxiliary troops, so to speak, such as the morons like David X, or who write on the military pornography, they really believe that what is happening. And only when their, movie patent trained brains began to see Russians moving to the West, they started to, sound alarm that, oh my God, things are happening the way we were not supposed to, observe. But already in 2022, the moment Russian army sat into the strategic defense, these were the bad news for Pentagon and those people who planned, because they never fought the enemy, who is not only better than you are, but they wait for you to come in. And what was happened, obviously, after this famous counteroffensive, which was completely wiped out with the loss of 166,000 of personnel by Ukrainian army and thousands of tanks, APCs, what have you, during this counteroffensive, not even reaching the first line of defense. That was the moment. But somebody still was planning those things. And believe me, they haven't been planned by Ukrainian general staff. They have been planned in Ramstein, in Brussels, and in Pentagon. And what we talk about now, when Mr. Kellogg goes, to pretend that he can somehow convey some message that Russians will be bullied, it's funny. He has to understand one thing. I do not deliberately pause this thing on the video here because it will be banned. Go to my blog and look at this video which is posted there, Liberated Ruskaya Porечная. In Kursk Oblast, Russian soldiers inspect buildings, and in one of the basements, when the liberated Ruskaya Porечная, found bodies of numerous old victims who have been tortured by the Nazis. Could be Poles, could be Ukrainians, could be French, and then with tight hands herded into the basement and executed by throwing grenades into basement. I sense NATO training here. West cannot be saved. And the point is, if Mr. Kellogg wants to come and talk to somebody in Russia and convey some, oh yeah, guys, you lost 600,000, which of course Russians will laugh at him and will basically accuse him of being, non-professional military cadre officer of the highest rank. The question is, what happened in Ruskaya Porечная happens all the time. Russians are liberating village by village, town by town, and it repeats itself over and over again. Executions, mass murders of the civilians, especially Russians. And guess what? Here's what we have. This is the training which was provided by the West. And what can I say? It's difficult to talk about it, but killing children, as I already stated, civilians, POWs. Well, here it is. Russians took a couple of POWs 2 days ago, and they killed another civilians. And what they told, you can watch the video, is the prisoners from the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region spoke about the order to kill Russian speakers. We had an order from the commander to nullify it, multiply by 0, that means kill. Everyone who speaks Russian, said one of the prisoners, answering the questions why they killed a civilian. So, well, this is the pattern. This is NATO training, and anybody who tells me that it's not NATO training, yes, it is. And armed forces of Ukraine, and especially its Nazi element, have been trained by the American, French, British, and other people. They trained basically not very good military people. I disagree when people say that now it's a good military. No, it's not. It's primarily sits into those bunkers, and Russians move every day, every day. No, but they're really good at killing civilians, killing POWs, and children. And the number of those, they are massive. They kill Russians. They kill Russians, notwithstanding if they're military or anybody else. And so, as I want to explain to you, well, I don't think so Trump, let alone Kellogg, who grew up probably on all this, fake military mythology of the U.S. military, he understands those things. He simply has no experience. Americans have no experience with that. They don't understand what concentration camps have been, except for the generation of those American GIs who landed in Normandy and who started liberating those concentration camps. But no, United States imported all important and critical Nazis, including SS, who shaped the view of the United States Army, for example. That is why, for example, respecting Mr. McGregor, I will tell you immediately, Russia and Germany cannot be allies, and they have never been allies except from the times of Catherine the Great and Paul, who were obviously German by their origin. But what Germans did, it hasn't been forgiven. And here we have this situation. We have this dude, German General Boldman. He talks about that there is no peace between Russia and Germany. There is no longer peace between Russia and Germany, Bundeswehr General Andrew Boldman said in an interview to BR24. Formally, legally, we are not at war, but in my opinion, there has been no peace for a long time. According to the officer, due to the geostrategic position, Germany being in the center of Europe and playing the key role in hypothetical military conflict with Russia. That's the modus operandi, and that's how German military, most of it anyway, thinks. They don't mind, Russians dying. They still believe that they could be their key, anchor of the future war with this, pathetic Bundeswehr and whatever it became of Germany. But you have to understand, this is where it is coming from. United States inherited this basically sadistic and, racist attitude towards Slavs being, subhumans. Washington establishment thinks like that. From State Department, to CIA, to Pentagon. Most of them are. And when you talk to me, anybody talks to me, oh yeah, some American generals, some German generals, they don't have no clue what they're dealing with. Because actually Europe came back to the established path. And as I already forestalling that many people will be saying, oh, you're not doing this, using the broad brush, about people of Europe. Well, I know there are many decent people in Europe. I know there are many people who are not racist, but most are. So, and they view Russians as subhumans, as I already stated. Europe is back into this normal state. And as the result, here what we have, Mr. Medvedev, former president of Russian Federation and secretary of the, deputy chair of the Russian Security Council, essentially second man after Vladimir Putin, saying in his Telegram channel a couple of days ago, read what he says. And he talks about the Walking Dead end of the season. That's the name of his post. And he's talking, of course, about Mr. Biden. Lately, he clearly did not fully understand what was happening. Correct. Neither does the United States. Yes, it must be admitted that such a war is beneficial to the US in economic terms, but the political cost and the real threat of a fatal conflict are much more serious. But the old man was not ready for this. This is the case when the head of the world's largest power completely failed to cope with the situation. As a result, Democrats lost the election, and we know what is going on. James Kunstler beautifully described it, but this is from the second number 2 in Russian military political hierarchy. And he talks about, although in my opinion, in the current reality, it is basically impossible for full normalization of the Russian-American relations, and this will drag for decades. And quite frankly, it is not clear whether it is needed at all. United States positioned itself as existential enemy of Russia and Russian people, and its chihuahuas, its lapdogs in Europe, ranging from Germany to France to Italy, they are back to what they have been: European Nazi powers. This was the European Reich, which invaded Soviet Union on the 22nd of June 1941, and this is what United States, those people who were behind it, they transplanted it on its soil, ranging from, well, you know, there's a Jewish, obviously, a pack, massive, so to speak, influence, but exceptionalism, their perverted view of war, which was rewritten in the United States, it was done by the United States willingly, importing basically what have been at that time simply destroyed completely by Russians. And Russians are now understanding there's no talk to Europeans, at least. With the United States, yeah, Russians must talk, because obviously it is all about modus vivendi between 3 major superpowers in the world: Russia, United States, and China. And as for the other, attempts on to somehow salvage something in the United States or military, or pretend some operational effects on the, whatever they will be trying to implement within the United States, well, what can I say? I wish Mr. Trump good luck, really. I am. I'm American citizens. I live here. I love this country. And I'm certainly, have the vested interest in this country to succeed, but not in fighting wars. The United States never was good at any real ground war. It lost all of it. So, and bar some brilliant, exposition of the American naval power in the World War II in the Pacific theater operations, they really have to think hard, especially when sending such a person as Mr. Kellogg, who won't understand basic combat model on which war was fought since the times of Osipov and Lanchester, coming up with the attrition model, because this is the foundation of any kind of the military conflict. And this is what I wanted to tell you guys today. And as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. Those who can afford it, please support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee and two. So have a nice new administration. I hope so, me too, I voted for Trump. And I'll talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye.